Hello, my name is James Haynes of the Epsom and Ewell Times. We're at the North East Surrey College of Technology in the constituency of Epsom and Ewell. Today is Monday the 17th of June 2024 and I'm interviewing Steve McKenna of the Green Party. Welcome.
Welcome.
Why do you want to be an MP in the constituency of Epsom and Ewell?
Epsom and Ewell as an area has been, often many of the residents say that it's a non-political sort of place because it's run by the residents' associations for many, many years. But there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the way things are happening in Epsom and Ewell. There's a lot of problems in the area and we have a very different message. Now, I'm already a councillor in Reigate and Banstead, the borough down the road. We do have a very different message in the Green Party. It's very much about investment and looking at the ways that we can fix broken Britain, if you want to put it in those terms. Many things are broken, or at least in serious decline. So we think we've got a very special message. I'm very happy to be standing in Epsom. I know the area. I've lived in Surrey quite a few years now. I'm a town planner and I'm a housing specialist, so I know a lot about the issues facing people in the housing sector and, of course, the Green Belt, which is a massive issue locally. So I think I can make a contribution on that front.
What will sustain universities if tuition fees are scrapped in your manifesto?
We've got, in our manifesto, we've got very significant elements of investment planned, higher education, and all forms of education because they're suffering from various costs and cutbacks, and there is a threat to a number of universities around the country. I have worked in a number of universities directly, and I've seen particularly some of the challenges that they're facing at the moment. There is a reliance on overseas students to fund a lot of the colleges that are around the country relying on that, which is a difficulty because often they want to bring dependents and that may be stopping now. So many of the universities may find that some of that is drying up. Now, tuition fees on their own, I don't want them to go up. We want to abolish them, actually, for students. I'm quite keen on earn while you learn. I'm very passionate about degree apprenticeships. I designed a degree apprenticeship course in town planning at one university. And I think that is the way forward for many people because it's going to get us out of this sort of logjam. My daughter is at university at the moment and she's really struggling because there's no maintenance grants, being ripped off by a rogue landlord. It's just terrible what they have to. And earn while you learn, I think, is good because why should my daughter, for example, or anybody have to get a job in a bar or work until late in the evening and then get up for early lectures in the morning? If you earn while you learn, it takes some of that pressure off. And it doesn't add a lot in terms of time for your course. It might add a year or two onto the degree apprenticeship. But you are working, you're earning, you're learning. So what's not to like about that?
Okay, thank you. My next question is a big concern for young people currently. It's the proposal for conscription. Do you believe this is right, or should we scrap it and just forget about the whole idea?
Well, many European countries do have some form of conscription. I've got family in Norway. Now, I've got a cousin there in his early 20s. He was in the army for a year. And they do operate that system. And a lot of the people that I talk to over there, younger people, seem to like it. I don't know, but I think we're not in favour of that because we think there are much better ways of engaging young people in society. Even the military say, to be honest, that they don't want that because even if it was 30,000 people, the figures being talked about, 30,000 people going into the military under a conscription policy. I don't think that would work. The military would find it very difficult, distracting. They want people that are skilled coming in. So it's a tough one. But we don't have a problem with saying no to conscription. It's absolutely clear from our point of view. Not to say that there shouldn't be some idea of citizenship, civics, those sorts of things, which I think are important for younger people to get involved with. I'm very keen on saying to people, let's get involved in the voluntary sector, social care. A range of career options can be tried and tested for a period, which I think is, again, quite a good thing to do. Networks of volunteers working in the charity sector, all of that is brilliant stuff. So I think there's a lot of alternatives to conscription, which I think is very much a political message being thrown out by certain other parts of the political persuasion. Nothing to do with the Greens. We don't support that, as I've said. So I think it's People will talk about it, especially in the heat of an election campaign, but it's not a realistic prospect in my view.
Is Israel using proportionate force in its own defence?
Well, you don't have to listen to me on this, but I have got strong views on it. But what I would say is you've got the United Nations who've been talking about disproportionate force for quite a long time. Courts of International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, they've all basically, without putting too much of an emphasis on it, they've all taken Israel to task on this and said, it's not proportionate. Even the words plausible genocide have been used by the Criminal Justice Court. So, and frankly, I think that when you see areas being bombed from 30,000 feet, when there's no food getting in, when there's no water getting in, it's you have to say it feels very much like a revenge mission for what was done. And what was done was totally unacceptable, of course. But it does seem as though there are many, many thousands of people now being deliberately killed. So how you want to call that, I don't know. But to me, I think it is disproportionate. Doesn't seem to be any idea that it could be terminated fairly soon. It seems to be tracking on and on and on. So, how many more people have got to die would be an awful thing to see. And unfortunately, I heard today that the war cabinet in Israel's government has been dissolved, so I don't know what that means, but we want peace. We want peace. I'm not anti-Israel in any way, but I would say very clearly, I don't like the Israeli government and what it's doing at the moment. I would love to see an alternative Israeli government, which actually is trying to find a peaceful solution and a peaceful outcome, because I can't believe that there are not a lot of Israeli people that want to live in peace. You can't live. It seems to me they're being forced into a situation where they have to accept constant warfare. Well, who wants to live like that? It's not beneficial for anybody. So I would say a change of Israel's government and a change of the policies would be a very good thing to try and get everybody around the table. We believe in either a one state, which seems hard to imagine due to everything that's going on, or a two-state solution. But Israel, I don't think really is yet ready to engage on that agenda. So it's unfortunate, but I think ultimately, the international community has got to apply pressure on Israel to engage properly with this to find a long-term permanent solution.
Your party is proposing an increase to £15 an hour for the minimum wage. How do you think this will affect small businesses in Epsom-Newell?
Well, I'm very passionate about small businesses. I've done a lot of urban regeneration in my career because I'm also a surveyor as well as being a town planner. And I know the problems that many tertiary parades and many secondary shopping areas are having, trying to keep going with business rates and with all the pressures from internet and everything else. So many businesses would see this as another potential extra cost that they have to manage. The problem is, I think, rather than the £15 wage though, is actually access to people who want a career or to work in those sorts of places. So the bigger problem is not the minimum wage. It's actually having a proper living wage which will attract people to work in those places. Town centres are struggling all across the country. I think they're a fantastic location to create jobs, but people have got to feel that they're going to be paid a decent wage, a living wage, and that there is a career for them. I know lots of places, and I'll just tell you one conversation I had with one council a few years ago, because I was looking at the opportunity for creating a retail outlet. And they said to me, there was a parade of 10 shops, so we want to do another one. And they said to me, we don't really want retail outside the town centre. We're quite happy for all these to be converted to residential. I said, but do you realise this, in that parade, there's 30 people employed? I said, so if you get rid of all your tertiary and secondary village, whatever it might be, stores, you're going to lose thousands of jobs or hundreds of jobs in your borough. And if you replicated that across the whole country, it could be millions of jobs. So I think we've got to support town centres, critical for service delivery, critical to build on the work that small businesses have been done, support small businesses. Business rates will help if we can cut back on business rates and support businesses in that way. I'm sure they'll be able to find money. They'd rather take on extra people than pay business rates, I'm sure. So, and particularly if there are apprenticeships where they're getting support as well from things like the apprenticeship levy. I think there's lots of ways that businesses could be supported, and we need them.
Okay, thank you. Is there a suitable compromise for building more adequate housing while protecting the greenbelt?
No. I think the problem is, although in Epsom and Newell there's a long fight going on to protect the remaining areas of greenbelt, what I've said very clearly is that the nature of our housing system is that we're actually being forced into a situation where housing targets are imposed on local communities. And that's very much what has been going on for the last 20, 30 years. Now, I've looked at this in great depth and detail. The reality is we actually had a position, say, in 1980, where the private rented sector was virtually dead. You had a lot of council housing, and then everybody had a reasonable chance of becoming an owner-occupier at that time. Owner-occupation was creeping upwards. What happened? Legislation came in to say the private sector has got a role to play. So whereas it was 6% of the stock in about 1978, 1979, it's now much greater, a huge amount of the stock. If you wanted to buy my house today, you'd be competing with landlords that would want to buy my house. So they could convert it. They will pay more than you can to buy my house. So owner-occupiers are under threat from the private rented sector. They will be taking out more and more of the stock. That forces everybody into saying, well, where can I buy somewhere? That's where the builders come in and say, we'll build you this, we'll build you that. But it's unaffordable. And that's crazy, really. They want to build in the greenbelt in places in the southeast because that's where they'll get the best prices. But they don't want to do affordable housing. And unfortunately, we've got a problem now whereby they've sold off 3 million, I think, virtually council houses, still selling off about 30,000 a year, council houses. Private rented sector's going up all the time, which means that there's less stock available for everybody to actually own their own homes. So we would actually take action. You've got to deal with this in the round. You've got to look at the private rented sector, the builders and their housing targets, which they want to deliver because it makes money, but actually it's not affordable for most people. And we've got to stop the right to buy. Transitional arrangements would have to be put in place because a lot of people like right to buy. They don't realise, though, the massive problem it's caused, which is actually they might like the right to buy, but it means that their kids and grandkids will never be able to buy anything because of where we are. So it's a very complex issue. I hope I've explained some of it. I could go on about this for the whole period of our discussion, but it is tricky. But definitely, the green belt is a sacrosanct thing, which has been seen as such since it was created in the 1940s. Most people see greenbelt as essential, not just for things like biodiversity, but mental health, as we found during the pandemic. Green areas, air quality. The primary purpose of greenbelt in planning terms is to prevent urban sprawl from happening. And what we're seeing in Epsom and Newell is urban sprawl. It's gradually joining up the other areas around it. So 20 years from now, we could have London Borough of Epsom and Newell. That's how it could go. And a lot of people are seeing the fields disappear. They moved here for that reason, that they had fields, they had countryside nearby. They could cycle safely. They could walk in an area where there wasn't much pollution. The pressure coming on from housing in these areas and using up the last bits of green resource that we've got are such that we'll have all the adverse impacts of that traffic, not just all the sort of loss of services like lack of a GP, dentist, hospital overloaded. All those things will happen if we just have a free-for-all allowing the house builders to build. There may be a compromise, to answer your question eventually. There may be a compromise on this, but I think it's about social housing provision. That's if we're going to build new homes, social housing is what we should be doing. And that will take so much of the pressure out of the market. That's the solution.
Thank you. Do you support ULEZ covering all London boroughs? And if so, should it be extended to Epsom and Newell?
That's a very good question. ULEZ, I know, is not that popular with a minority, but actually overall, I think 95% of vehicles don't have a problem going in and out of the ULEZ area. There have been noticeable improvements in air quality. Don't forget, thousands of people in the London area are dying every year because of air pollution. If it was if you lost that many people in a short period of time, the government, the public will be up in arms because it's spread over a long period, over a 12-month period, across the whole country. People think it's not, it's not a really big problem, and people love their cars. What I would say is that for the people just over the border, and I know that in Epsom and Ewell, many people drive to work still. Good public transport, but I think 65–70%, the main earners will drive to work. They may or not all drive over the border, but if they do, then they're going to be hit with the ULEZ charge, potentially, if they haven't got an electric car, etc., etc. They're not compliant. So a minority of those people may be affected adversely. I would say a solution might be to extend it over into Epsom and Ewell, but then that must be accompanied by a scrappage scheme. Who's going to pay for that? Surrey County Council or the Mayor of London? There must be a scrappage scheme to encourage people to actually upgrade into more compliant vehicles rather than pay the charges. So a lot of things that would have to follow an extension of it. But I think anyway, even if it wasn't extended, I still think a scrappage scheme should be available for people in Surrey because they're so close to Greater London. We've got to introduce some measures that would make it better for them. Reducing bus and train fares, for instance, would help. So that would encourage people to use public transport rather than driving over the border. So there's lots of things that need to be done there. It wasn't set up in the best way. And don't forget, it was Boris that started all this. He inculcated the idea of ULEZ, and the Mayor of London has carried it forward. Having said that, the Mayor of London actually has allowed the Silvertown Tunnel to go ahead under the Thames, which is apparently having a big impact on air pollution just around that area. So, swings and roundabouts, excuse the pun.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen McKenna from the Green Party. That's all my questions.